Okay, do you remember a few weeks ago when I made a video going over the weird podcast George made with Mike, where they basically said a bunch of words, but at the end, Mike was just doing damage control for Logan. George had a bunch of valid points that he wanted to bring up in the podcast, but at the end, all the viewers just were left with a feeling of as if George brought the wrong person onto the podcast. Maybe it should have been Logan. But absolutely nobody was ready for George to bring his literal offender onto his podcast. I don't even think that there is 0.00001% of victims that want to look their offender in the face, especially when fame and money clearly play a role in them both deciding to have this weird and awkward interaction where the stories were wet and soggy, and Bobby, for the first time ever, I do admit, kind of maybe a little bit admits that he's probably sorry. Also says that maybe he was just a little bit in the wrong.
But I don't remember ever trying to touch you. But if I did that, I literally don't remember. But if I did that, I'm sorry. I do it for comedy reasons.
But don't worry, guys. He also says he doesn't remember.
I don't even remember what I said or did or didn't do. I remember moments.
Because yes, it's totally normal to not be able to remember something 2 months later when legit your entire job and career is surrounded on you telling stories from your past that happened multiple years ago. Okay, before we dive into this though, I want to clarify a couple things. First off, I totally respect George and his opinion to forgive Bobby for his actions, but I also just don't understand the actions that George does, and I don't understand his reasoning either. Sort of blaming the comedy industry for expecting successful comics to basically have to cross these lines that like literally every other profession doesn't allow you to cross. Is it true? I'm not too sure, to be honest, because all I know that is if I was a comedian and I was kind of forced into making other people feel uncomfortable, then I would probably walk and find a job that aligned more with my moral compass. I wouldn't just claim to forget all the horrible things I did 2 months ago when people presented me with irrefutable proof of the things that I did. Or better yet, just don't be a comic that does this sort of thing, because there's so many examples of comedians crossing this line and they're getting away with it and the public seems to be completely fine with it. So when it comes to Bobby now crossing this line, the internet wants to cancel Bobby for it. But the thing is, I'm not trying to defend Bobby. I just think that, is there a line that's to be crossed? Are you supposed to let the people that you're on stage with know beforehand that you're going to be pulling these stunts before you do it? Or is this all improv supposed to actually be how it is? But all I know is what I find acceptable, and I'm not in the business of canceling anybody, as I prefer to be a fly on the wall. Okay, so last time I covered this, George and Mike had a conversation where George kind of alluded to and then eventually just straight out said that the alleged essay happened.
Just empty it out. I never had a problem with Bobby Lee. No, he knows I had a problem with the way that Logan and you were kind of gassing him to keep doing. He started the episode putting his balls in my face.
Not to anybody's surprise, Mike really didn't address this with any concern that it deserved, though.
I do pray that we could mend it and make it right. Yeah, I mean, or not.
Furthermore, George talked about how the clip was edited to make him look crazy.
Did they not cut shit that you should have stood up for me and said, hey, you can't cut that shit? That's gonna make him look like an idiot for leaving.
Okay, let's slow down, and I'll answer that. We numerous times on the show, which I'm sure a number of shows do, cut things that we believe will protect the integrity or reputation of the guest.
That protected nobody but him.
No, of the guest. That's what I'm trying.
Well, what about the guy that you break bread with, bro?
I don't want to live on this planet anymore.
This is probably alluding to the fact that Logan probably cut all of the essay out of his podcast and posted the clean version. Like, come on, man. How could you do this to your friend? Better yet, how could you do this to your worst enemy, man? This is all alleged, by the way. The alleged clips of George's essay might not ever reach public, but when George confronted Bobby about it, dude, Bobby got the 1,000-yard stare. It looked like he'd seen a ghost, and then dude asked to move on.
Let's move on from that.
He didn't deny it, so I'm gonna let you guys do with that as you will, because I sure as hell am. Am I a bad person? Nah, I'm just safe. Now, Bobby Lee is definitely an acquired taste type of comic. A guy you think is either hilarious or you just don't understand. I'm the latter.
Are you with a water?
I just don't understand Bobby Lee. Maybe it's just because I really like my personal space. Like, I really, really like my personal space. Like, I don't like people touching me unless I really, really know and trust them a lot. And I'm guessing a lot of other people are like me, so I'm guessing that the reasonable thing would be to Google Bobby Lee and see what kind of things come up, you know? Just a little bit of preparation before you sit down with the guy. See who he is, what he's about on the internet, I'm sure we're not going to find anything weird, right?
I love you though. Give me a bubble.
No, please, God.
No.
No. Oh, God.
Why are you guys doing
Bubble on the
this?
lips. All right.
Bobby.
Yeah. I felt bad about that. I love you.
Thank you.
Great love. Good section.
So fucking
Sexual
awkward.
section.
But remember, guys, Bobby says this is not only allowed, but the people he's with have to play along with them. Otherwise, they're the buzzkill of the joke, you know?
Listen, comedy, there's no wrong or right in comedy. I think everything goes.
I don't know what kind of thinking or logic that is, but dude, that is absolutely nuts. Like, what?
What?
If I, for whatever worldly reason, did a podcast with Bobby Lee based on what I just saw on the internet, I'm going to tell my wife not to come to the studio that day out of her own protection. But that's not even an original thought, because guess what George did? When he set up this Bobby Lee interview, he actually did leave his fiance out of this, and for good reason, because he wanted to protect her from what Bobby Lee could do from what he did to him. If you ask me, simply saying, I'm sorry, I don't remember the horrible thing I did to you, actually makes it feel 10 times more scarier, because this man's getting away with making people feel very uncomfortable. And then pulling the it wasn't me at the wheel or some type shit. Like, I really don't understand how a celebrity like that can just magically forget something and the public just allows the wool to be pulled over their head. But like I said, I'm just a fly on the wall, and my opinion, nor anybody else's opinion, should hold any weight on the decisions George makes. And if he wants to forgive and forget, maybe that's just as healing for him as it would be for me to cut all ties and remove this person from my life. You know, to each their own, and everybody heals differently. In George Janko's podcast, episode 69, giggity,
Who else but Quagmire?
titled The Bobby Lee Interview, George brought Bobby within 5 feet of him.
Get back 6 feet, ma'am. 6 fucking feet.
That's a risky move if you ask me, but the podcast was fairly productive, a lot more productive in my opinion than the one with Mike. It was basically the exact same topics and talking points as the last one, but there was a lot more progress made. But here's where the problem lies, is Bobby kind of used his podcast as a way to blanket excuse a lot of his previous behavior in the past. He might not have said it in that exact way, but he insinuated and worded his excuse to cover his most recent and all of his past weird behavior. He must have seen the huge number of giant YouTube channels that were showcasing all of his weird and sus behavior to a lot of people who had no idea who he was before they ever broadcasted him on their channels. The outcome was not what you'd expect of this podcast, guys. George really pushes for Bobby to work closely with him in the future.
Would you feature for me or no? Is that too little?
I would. I have a show in Arizona coming up August 1st.
I wish you headline.
I headline. Yeah.
Okay, good. So we have to do this.
I would love to do this.
I'll fly you out.
Oh, thank you.
The hotel, right?
Okay.
I'll pay you way more than I would pay a feature.
I appreciate that.
I think we should try a weekend.
I would love that.
Yeah, I think it'd be great.
Your audience is not too fond of me.
They're fond of you. Hey, audience, be fond of them now.
No one likes to kiss ass.
It's not a move that I would have done myself, but like I keep saying, to each their own, I guess. I just feel like maybe this is a collaborative, spiteful move towards Logan, because right out of the gate, Bobby calls Logan's podcast the Jake Paul podcast.
I'm just going to break down what happened with the Jake Paul podcast.
Got it.
Okay.
Which is kind of funny considering the big brotherly issues they got all over the internet.
Over it. Like, and meanwhile,
Come on, I'm your brother building a
oh
business.
yeah, you're my brother building a business. You love to play both sides, bro.
Also how the fight with Mike Tyson was just postponed, and all of a sudden Logan thinks everybody wanted to see him fight his brother.
Of course, Logan Paul had to step in to try and make it about himself, where he says, so Mike Tyson's out. I'll step in and we can settle this once and for all. I do think when it comes to influencer boxing, this will be the fight to end all fights. Knowing them, they will orchestrate what's essentially the final scene in Rocky 2, but as Jake Paul is laying there on the ground going along with the act, Logan's ego is not going to be able to take it, and he's going to stab his brother in the back, stand the f*** up, and drink a bottle of Prime in everyone's face.
Like, no, bro, it would be actually kind of funny to see Jake knock your ass out, because I think Jake has some true animosity towards him for constantly undermining him and holding him to double standards. But let's be honest here, let's be real. Bobby does have some jokes when he wants to be funny. He really doesn't need to fall back on this weird sus shit to pay the bills, and could definitely put food on the table by making hilarious jokes like this Jake Paul joke he did here. Now, one argument I see a lot of people have in the comments when they're defending Bobby Lee for his actions on Impulsive, I'm talking about his actions on screen, not his character, because I'm not here to cancel him or destroy his character. Now, these people are saying the internet shouldn't believe an allegation and that there's no real evidence and that the essay is unproven and shouldn't be taken seriously. But does Bobby shoving his unwanted balls and I'm assuming his shaft in George's face account for at least indecent exposure here? Now, that smile is not out of joy. That smile is more of one that's like, get me the hell out of this situation. And also, how is this happening to me right now? Because I don't think anybody in any situation ever should have to prepare themselves for a face full of chestnuts. And what do you do in the situation once you're in it? People out there on the other side of the fence that take secondhand offense from this say, oh man, if this happened to me, I would knock this guy out right where he stands. Really? You would? You'd really give up all of your high ground by also breaking the law? Look, George is a successful person that knows that there's boundaries you can't cross or you'll lose your job, unlike a lot of these people in the comments don't realize, or maybe they're just willing to lose their job. Or I'm sure if they were in George's position, they'd think twice about doing something that would end such a crazy career. George knew he was in a super delicate situation here, and he arguably made the best decision by just leaning away from the Walmart breakfast sausage. Okay, so Bobby said sorry.
I want to open up by saying that I'm sorry. I feel I'm just going to break down what happened with the Jake Paul podcast.
Got it.
Okay. So you know, I usually do podcasts in my ecosystem, right? So it's like I know the rhythms and I know what I can and can't say, and generally, everything is people are pretty open to, they know who I am, right? But with you guys, I didn't know, so and also it's a huge platform, so I was like super nervous. So, I tend to get bullyish and out of survival.
It's good and all that the vibes are nice, but I still fail to understand Bobby's viewpoint here. This dude has been famous and done live performances since before George was a child, so how could this guy out of all people be super nervous? Like, this guy is famous for being confrontational, but all of a sudden he was nervous like it was his first time on camera and on Impulsive podcast? I don't think so. And this wasn't even live. This was a pre-recorded podcast. So really, there was absolutely no reason for Bobby to feel the pressure during this. To say that the Impulsive podcast is just such a big podcast that you felt that you needed to get up and show somebody your sausage is absolutely ridiculous. It's literally laughable. While George is just over here thinking and realizing that not a single one of his friends is sitting in the room with him at that moment. That's actually super devastating, honestly. Bobby has been famous since the 90s, so hiding behind the excuse of I was nervous is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. But hey, if George isn't really gonna hold you truly responsible for what you did, then this is the complete logical response, honestly. So a little bit down the pipe during this podcast, Bobby says to George that he really doesn't remember doing any of this stuff to him on the Impulsive podcast. All the memories just poof, up and disappeared right out of his mind. Actually, let's hear it from the man, the myth, the threatened.
So when number one, I do so many podcasts, I don't even remember what I said or did or didn't do. I remember moments. And also secondly, when you walked off the set, I literally was confused by it. I don't know the drama behind the podcast. I know that you had written this speech.
I wish I had writers for it.
Right? And you know what I mean? I thought the comedy instinct was to say that it was like boring or whatever, and I fell asleep.
Yeah.
And the third thing is that, and I truly don't remember, and it is on brand, but I don't remember ever trying to touch you. But if I did that, I literally don't remember, but if I did that, I'm sorry. I do it for comedy reasons. I don't know anything about your religion or who you are. In fact, I didn't really know who you. I know who you are now, but I didn't really know who you were. And but with all that being said, I really truly apologize. I love people. I love podcasting, and I think that you're a voice that people talk about now, and you're here, and I just apologize.
Okay guys, so do you believe him? I sure as hell don't. That's exactly what a PR team would tell Bobby to say as soon as George gave the go-ahead to sweep this all under the carpet. All Bobby has to do now is plead the fifth to the public and say, I didn't remember. I don't know what happened, you know? And I'm innocent now. You have to believe me because I said so. Like I said before though, if George says this is the best way for him to move forward, then who are any of us to say that that he should be doing anything differently, honestly. But still, I always have my doubts about what people put on the internet, as anybody should realize by now. Celebrities and the things they say on the internet are always molded to make them look like the perfect people in the public eye. And especially when they're in damage control trying to pull the wool over the public's eyes. Who knows what was said or what wasn't said behind closed doors, but the thing we know now for certain is that George really wants to work with Bobby a lot in the future. And so basically, in my opinion, there must be some sort of a resemblance of a friendship between the two. It's either that or George has Bobby by the very balls he shoved in George's face here out of spite. Man, if that was actually what was happening here, that would be hilarious, but a boy can only dream.
It was for a while until I went, did I? I don't remember, but
I actually, it's so funny.
I asked my assistant to look it up, and she's like, I didn't see that. You know what I mean? And I was just like, oh.
Here. I was going to go into this whole, retaliation, but I do have receipts, and I have the clip as well.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, oh no, I have receipts. I just didn't want to do that. Wasn't my whole
Let's move on from that. If I did, I did. I'm sorry.
Somehow Bobby doesn't remember these specific incriminating events, but then somehow gave George an exact reason why he did them. Does that make any sense to you? How can you not know that you did something and also know exactly why you did it? That makes absolutely no logical sense.
Really weird. We seem perfectly coherent. It's just we can't remember who we are. It's like our identities have been wiped out somehow.
Can't, he's lying, guys. Sorry, big spoiler here. The dude's entire career consists of bringing up stories from the past in really high detail, and sometimes in a little bit too much detail, and some creepy ass detail sometimes too.
I'm gonna be completely honest with you. This story could ruin my career.
Shut up. Come on.
So there's a street in back of Adelita, and we used to call it Hooker Alley, right? Okay. And Hooker Alley had the really ugly ones that couldn't go in.
Nice.
And they had girls that we didn't know what their ages were.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Now, I don't know what the ages were. I just said
Well,
that.
do you ever really know the age of a hooker?
Yeah. I'm going to repeat that. I don't know. Anyway, I go to Hooker Alley, and then when you go walk down, they grab you, right?
They're very aggressive.
Mister, right? They grab you, Mister, right? And you go, I'm an American, don't touch me. You know what I mean? That's what I used to do. I'm an American, right?
Do they call you Chino and stuff?
Chino, you know what I mean? Like, Mister, and I go, don't touch me. And at the end of the thing, there was this girl, and she had her face toward the brick wall. And I go, hey, and she goes, you want to, boom, boom, whatever. I go, yeah. So there's this place called the Miami Hotel at the end.
Nice.
We go upstairs.
You get to keep the towel?
No. I know you don't want to keep it, right? There's stains on it. Discharge stains.
It still smells like cum after they clean it.
Yeah. So we get naked. I turn the lights off, right? And we're in bed now. And I put the condom on. And she's really cold, I feel so bad saying this story.
Girls are always cold.
And so I stick it in. It's very tight, right? And then the moon is shining through
Did you use the lube?
crack. No. The moon is shining through the window in a little crack, right?
Very romantic.
Yeah, it's very romantic. yeah. And then her head turns, and the moon, I see her face.
Yeah.
And you can see tears coming down her face and snot bubbles. And she's shaking.
Excuse me, what the fuck?
But hey, I can play dumb and see what else he has to say. Let's see.
So I referred to you as Ringo in that podcast.
That was the only thing that hurt, man. I feel like I'm not Ringo. I feel like I'm.
Well, I mean, you're not John Lennon.
Get out.
No.
Get out.
Between you.
No. Between all of them. Yeah. I'm definitely John Lennon.
Oh, you really?
So
who is Ringo? Who is Paul?
Paul.
Oh, I was just making a reference to a band, but okay, I get what you're doing.
Logan Paul is Paul.
Oh, Logan Paul. Oh, Paul. Logan Paul. And Mike?
The groupies.
Whoa. He just did this, didn't he? Yeah.
Pretty healthy for George to think this, and everybody should think that they're the main character in their own lives. I think what George here is doing is breaking himself free from the stupid umbrella that Logan creates, where he draws a clear line in the sand and puts his friends on one side and him on the other, trying to make a clear distinction that he's better than you, has more privileges than you, and most narcissistic is all, you're not allowed to bring your concerns to the table. So leaving leaving that toxic environment would require some extreme rewiring of the brain, which I think we're seeing live with George here, as he tends to right now hold himself at the highest degree of standard that I think he could hold anybody at, which is good. Positive affirmations make a difference, man. I'm telling you.
I'm like, you really gotta make me mad.
Bobby,
Yeah.
I knew exactly who you were. And I said this on the episode with Mike, and I'll say it again in front of you. Oh, I do appreciate your apology. If it was me and you and we were just messing around and we were like having a podcast and you kept grabbing me because I know your comedy, I wouldn't be bothered by it. I know who you are, I know your comedy, I've seen your podcast. What bothered me on that episode was my friends weren't being friends.
Flipping rights, like I said, Logan maniacally laughing and George, fuck. Logan with his maniacal laugh and then Mike looking like he's laughing at dangling keys. It showed that they weren't really his true friends, and it was more like two friends letting a bully loose on a guy who, while also trying to control his actions, when they used his job and his income to try to leverage George, to just sit there and endure such a dehumanizing act, like, I don't know how else you can perceive that. And I mean, you heard it from George. He knew what Bobby was about going into that podcast. He knew that there might be a risk involved with sitting next to him during it. But like so many other podcast hosts, George expected Logan to keep things respectful and keep things safe for George. But instead, Logan just kind of played into the entire damn thing. It's crazy that Logan's like, oh yeah, I don't want to do it, but do it to George. Yeah, let George get the balls in his face. Like, what? I would never ever talk to a person again if they actively stood by and made that situation freaking worse for me. Forgiving Bobby and having him on his podcast so quickly actually does back up George's statement that, yeah, he was actually kind of prepared for the kind of shit Bobby threw his way. He clearly made it very far into the podcast, and during 5 of these alleged moments, and it really took Mike and Logan being shitheads for him to walk out. This was really about Mike and Logan. It wasn't about Bobby, in George's opinion.
Bobby, I knew exactly who you were. And I said this on the episode with Mike, and I'll say it again in front of you. Oh, I do appreciate your apology. If it was me and you and we were just messing around and we were like having a podcast and you kept grabbing me because I know your comedy, I wouldn't be bothered by it. I know who you are, I know your comedy, I've seen your podcast. What bothered me on that episode was my friends weren't being friends.
They didn't back you.
They didn't back me, bro.
Yeah.
They saw that I was actually going through things and they stepped on me when I was down. And it just felt like I wasn't in a place where the people around me wanted me to succeed. I apologize that you kind of got caught in this whole drama that we were all put into, but I just want to let you know, before, after, and during, I'm a fan of you, man. I really am. I like your comedy.
Now this is fair. Like super fair. If George wants to be friends with Bobby and isn't offended by what happened, then all the power to him. And it really makes people rushing to try to cancel Bobby for this look kind of stupid, because people are totally within their rights to not work with Bobby. And they also have the right to make him sign an agreement that bars him from doing shock comedy while they're working together. So to straight up cancel a person for this is treading a thin line, because, and I can't believe I'm defending Bobby's point even a little bit here, if the internet wants to cancel Bobby for this, then they're probably going to have to go for other comedians of the exact same type of humor, like Ari Shaffir, when he just whips his junk out on stage for everybody who didn't sign up to specifically see that, for all of those people to see. The only difference is that the entire crowd was laughing and having a good time. So you tell me if that was morally incorrect or not. And I think it's funny because the internet will be the one that sees the censored version of that, and they're going to be the ones that say that it's totally unacceptable. But that's the internet for you. You're going to have all walks of life on here, and some of them are going to be seeking things to be mad at just to be mad.
But you know, with all that being said, I really truly apologize. I mean, I love people. I love podcasting, and I think that you're a voice that people talk about now, and you know what I mean, you're here, and
Okay, so this was hard to translate, but I gave that lady from National Treasure 2 who deciphered the Olmec plank a call, and she was able to decipher what Bobby Lee was saying here. Okay, so Bobby here is saying that he's super thankful to George because right now George has the power to completely ruin his career, but instead George is deciding to lift him up. But I mean, what else can Bobby say in this situation? He was forgiven for essay allegedly. Joke or not though, the alleged essay towards George was entirely unscripted. So very real to George, and straight up he just couldn't have prepared himself for something like that. That right there screams that George is actually a good person to have in the podcast space, because George is not going to put himself in a situation where he knows what the outcome is going to be and then cries about it later on. And a lot of people think that that last comment left by Bobby was subtle knob gobbling, because, you know, it's kind of to be expected after what George just let slide. And especially in Bobby's circumstance here, George is the exact type of podcast host or host in general that allows for people like Bobby to get away with the things they do on stage. But man, I really do think Bobby's going to be thinking twice the next time he thinks it's a good idea to whip his pants down on stage or give a girl an unwanted kiss.
The relationship.
Also, you know, from now on, I probably, you know, the one thing, I probably would not start a podcast with a girlfriend. I think that's what I learned.
I started with my fiance. Everybody's like, "Don't do it, bro."
You did it?
Yeah.
Where is she?
You want to know the truth?
Yeah.
I didn't want her to sit on this episode.
Where is she?
She just went to the gym. And that's just me being honest with you.
Why?
Do you want my honest answer?
Yeah.
Well, quite frankly, I was very scared of you. I didn't know which direction you were going to take this, and I didn't want my poor fiance to get just destroyed, because you're comedically way better than me.
That's not true at all, dude.
Bro, I showed you a picture of her, and you said she wouldn't be with you unless you were where you're at, and I was like, "That's true. It's true.
It's a fucking joke. You got to grow another pair of balls, man."
It would have hurt a lot more if you said it right. I'll let you go.
So see, that's what I'm saying.
And
that hurt. No, I'm not gonna get it right. That's fine. It is out the way it is. What I'm saying
You're
is,
a sassy girl when you get mad.
When she's coming back.
I'm not confrontational until I'm really confrontational, and because of that, I'd rather not meet with people that put others in situations they tend to have to get themselves out of. Usually with means they're also not comfortable doing, aka, you know, pushing Bobby out of the way or something that you'd rather not do.
She was actually very excited to meet you.
I'd like to meet her. But, I mean, it offends me because, no, I came in here, dude, I couldn't wait to come here because it's like, because this...
You don't even know why you wanted to be here.
Yeah, I do. The way we're doing our podcast now is exactly the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
I can tell you pretty much exactly why I think Bobby wanted to be there. George said, "Hey dude, I'm willing to give you a chance instead of pressing charges. What do you think?" I mean, not much else could make the guy go from this to this for no reason. Now, in conclusion, so many YouTubers are accusing George of being a sellout here. They basically said that if Bobby ever did that to them, then they would never stoop so low as to have Bobby on their podcast to gain something from it. But, dude, who are these people to feel such secondhand offense? Like, I don't know, bro. Get your own life. I think the people on the outside looking in just need to realize that just because there's two ways to perceive every situation, it doesn't mean that we automatically must default to the worst of the two every time. And when a person comes out publicly and says, "Hey guys, I wasn't offended by that," then randoms definitely don't have the right to call him out and say he's wrong for his own thinking and his own decision making. Like, who are you to say that, really? But do I believe these two are friends? Nah, no I don't. I do, however, think this video needed to happen, number one, to save Bobby's career, and number two, because I believe now George is in a position of power and he couldn't resist showing the world a version of Bobby that's regretful, respectful, and forgetful. Basically, making him do the cardinal sin that no comedian says they're supposed to do, which is apologize for the jokes you say.
Whatever you do not apologize. The third guy that I golfed with, me, Ron White, and the third guy, who's not a comedian and not in the industry whatsoever, also said, whatever you do not apologize.
I really, truly apologize. And
if you ask me, that's actually pretty good revenge, if that is actually the case, which I hope it is. Either way, I did have fun breaking down this soggy apology, and if you liked the video, a subscription to the channel would be amazing. Enough of those allows me to buy food, which then I get energy to make videos, to make money, so I can buy food for this little girl who yells at me until I give her the good stuff.